They kicked the old man out of the company, but he was the real owner and surprised everyone. Walter Thompson watched silently as the woman in the black suit shouted words that echoed through the company's lobby. His 72 years weighed on his time-bent shoulders, but his blue eyes still held the same determination as when he was young. The executive pointed her finger at him, ordering him to leave the building immediately. "You lying old man! How dare you come here making up these absurd stories?" yelled Jennifer Parker, the executive director of Horizon Construction. "Security, get this man out of here before I call the police." Walter took a deep breath and firmly held the worn leather briefcase he had carried for decades. Inside were documents that could change everything, but the woman hadn't even wanted to hear what he had to say. Just 20 minutes earlier, he had entered that same lobby asking to speak to the board about something urgent. Something he had discovered after 15 years working there as a night watchman. "Ma'am, please just give me 5 minutes to explain," Walter said calmly, despite the hostility. "What I have to say is about this company's future." 5 minutes? Jennifer laughed scornfully. "Don't you understand that there's nothing a watchman could tell me that's important? You should be grateful to have gotten this job at your age, instead of making up lies." Employees passing through the lobby slowed their pace to watch the scene. Some whispered among themselves, others looked away awkwardly. Walter knew them all. For 15 years, he had greeted everyone who entered and left the building. He knew their stories, their families, their dreams and problems. "They're not lies, Miss Jennifer," Walter insisted. "If you'd let me show you these documents—" "Documents?" Jennifer interrupted, her voice rising another octave. "What documents could a watchman have that would interest the board of a company the size of Horizon?" That's when the 2 security guards arrived. Brian and Jason, 2 young men Walter had watched grow within the company, starting as interns. They seemed embarrassed by the situation, but followed the director's orders. "Sorry, Mr. Walter," murmured Brian, avoiding eye contact with the old man. "But we have to escort you to the exit." Walter nodded understandingly. He knew the young men were just following orders. He put the documents back in his briefcase and began walking toward the revolving door he had passed through thousands of times over the past 15 years. Jennifer followed him, still ranting. "And don't think about coming back here with these crazy stories," she shouted, making sure everyone heard. "If I see your face in this building again, I'll take appropriate measures." Walter stopped for a moment at the door and turned to look one more time at the marble lobby, the imposing columns, the golden Horizon Construction logo fixed on the wall. His eyes filled with tears, but not of sadness. It was nostalgia mixed with a determination he hadn't felt in a long time. "See you soon," he said softly, words only he could hear. Outside, the January cold in New York City stung his face. Walter walked to the nearest bus stop, holding his briefcase tightly. He had a lot of work ahead. For 15 years, he had observed, noted, and stored information. Now he knew exactly what needed to be done. In his small studio apartment in Chinatown, Walter spread dozens of documents across the kitchen table. Old contracts, certificates, notary records he had kept in a safe deposit box since 1987. Next to them, he placed notebooks full of notes he had made during his night shifts at Horizon. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he had found in the phone book. "Law Office of Michael Coleman," answered a female voice. "Good afternoon. I'd like to schedule an appointment with Mr. Michael. It's about a case of, let's say, property recovery." 2 days later, Walter was sitting in the small office of the young lawyer Michael Coleman, a man no older than 30 who had just opened his own practice. Michael listened patiently to the whole story, examining each document with growing attention. "Mr. Walter," said the lawyer, adjusting his glasses and rereading for the 3rd time a deed from 1985. "If what you're telling me is true, we're looking at one of the biggest cases of misappropriation I've ever seen in my life." "It's true, Mr. Michael. Every word." Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? It's going to be a long and difficult battle. Horizon Construction has powerful lawyers and a lot of money. Mr. Michael, I've already lost 15 years of my life. 15 years watching from afar while other people profited from what I built with my own hands." Walter leaned forward. It's not just about the money, it's about justice. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Michael and Walter were back in the lobby of Horizon Construction. Jennifer Parker came down the stairs with a mocking smile on her lips when she saw the elderly man. "I can't believe this old man is back," she said to the receptionist. "Call security immediately." "Actually, Mrs. Parker," interrupted Michael, introducing himself, "I'm a lawyer and I represent Mr. Walter Thompson. We'd like to speak with the board about an urgent legal matter." Jennifer looked from Michael to Walter, her expression changing from mockery to irritation. "Legal matter? What legal matter could a doorman have with our company?" "A matter of property," replied Michael calmly, handing her a sealed envelope. "This is an official document requesting access to the company's founding records and the property transfer contracts from 1987. Jennifer opened the envelope and read quickly. Her expression gradually changed. "This is ridiculous," she said, but there was something different in her voice. "You can't just come here and—" "We can and we are," said Michael. "According to the law, you have 48 hours to provide these documents, or the case will go directly to court." It was then that a man in a grey suit with neatly combed grey hair appeared in the lobby. Walter recognized him immediately, although he looked very different from the days when he only wore a dress shirt and a simple tie. "What's going on here?" asked Anthony Rodriguez, current president of Horizon Construction. Walter and Anthony stared at each other for a long moment. There was something in the air, a palpable tension that Michael couldn't fully understand. "Anthony," Walter said simply. "Walter," replied Anthony, his voice controlled, "I heard you've been spreading lies about our company." "They're not lies, Anthony, and you know that better than anyone." Jennifer looked from one to the other, confused. "You know each other." "We've known each other for a long time," said Anthony. "Walter used to work here, before he had some problems." "Problems that you created," Walter retorted. Michael realized there was much more to the story than his client had told him. He decided to take the initiative. "Mr. Rodriguez, I presume you're the president. My client is requesting access to documents that prove his involvement in the founding of this company. Documents that, according to him, were illegally altered in 1987. Anthony remained silent for a few seconds, studying Walter carefully. "Jennifer, cancel my morning meetings," he finally said. "Let's talk in my office." The four went up to the top floor of the building, where the presidential suite was located. Walter observed everything attentively. The walls covered in fine wood, the panoramic view of the city, the diplomas and awards in golden frames. All of that had been built with the money from the company he had founded. "Very well, Walter," said Anthony, settling behind the executive desk. "What exactly do you want?" "I want you to tell the truth to Mrs. Jennifer and Dr. Michael. Tell how you forged my signature on the share transfer documents. Tell how you made up that story about embezzlement to push me out of the company. Tell how you took everything while I lost my home, my car, my dignity." Jennifer looked at Anthony in surprise. "What is he talking about?" "He's talking about the fantasies of a bitter man," replied Anthony, but there was nervousness in his voice. "Walter had serious financial problems in 1987. There were irregularities in the contracts he signed. The company almost went bankrupt because of it." "Lies!" exploded Walter, slamming his hand on the table. "You know it's lies. You were my accountant, my friend. I trusted you." Michael opened his briefcase and took out some documents. "Mr. Rodriguez, here are the original records from the founding of Horizon Construction from 1979. The name of the founder and majority owner is Walter Thompson. We also have a 2024 forensic analysis here that proves the signature on the 1987 transfer documents is forged." Anthony turned pale. Jennifer approached to examine the documents. "This can't be right," she murmured. "The company was founded by Mr. Rodriguez. Everyone knows that." "No, Mrs. Jennifer," said Walter sadly. "The company was founded by me, with the money from the sale of the house I inherited from my parents. Anthony was my employee, my accountant, and, I thought, my friend." The room fell silent. Jennifer read and reread the documents, her expression gradually changing from disbelief to shock. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said finally, "these documents appear to be authentic. Do you have any explanation?" Anthony stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to everyone. "You know nothing," he said in a low voice. "You don't know what I went through, the difficulties I faced to keep this company running after Walter, after he left." "After you kicked me out with lies," corrected Walter. "I saved this company." Anthony turned abruptly. "You were losing contracts, making wrong decisions. If I hadn't taken control, Horizon would have gone bankrupt. And that gave you the right to forge documents? To steal my company?" Walter's voice trembled with contained emotion. Michael realized the situation was escalating. "Gentlemen, I suggest we continue this discussion more civilly. There are serious legal matters at stake here." It was then that Jennifer asked a question no one expected. "Mr. Walter, if you are truly the founder of this company, how do you explain working here as a doorman for 15 years without ever saying anything?" Walter sighed deeply. It was the question he knew he would have to answer sooner or later. "Because I needed to survive, Mrs. Jennifer. When Anthony pushed me out of the company in 1987, I was left with huge debts that had been taken out in my name. I lost everything: house, car, bank account. My wife, God rest her soul, got sick soon after and needed treatment. I took any job that came along." "But why here specifically?" insisted Jennifer. "Because I needed to keep an eye on my company. I needed to understand what had happened, how Anthony had managed to do that. And during all these years I watched, took notes, gathered evidence." Anthony laughed bitterly. "Evidence? What evidence could a doorman gather?" Walter opened his briefcase and pulled out 3 thick notebooks. "Evidence about the overpriced contracts you sign with your brother-in-law's construction company, about the cash payments you receive from your wife's materials company, about the apartments you buy with company money but register under straw men." The silence in the room was deafening. Jennifer stared fixedly at Anthony, who had turned white as a sheet. "For 15 years, Walter continued, I saw you coming here in the early hours to falsify reports. I saw you receiving envelopes from contractors. I saw you instructing employees to alter invoices. Everything is noted here with dates, times, and witnesses." Michael quickly flipped through one of the notebooks. "My God, Mr. Thompson, this is complete documentation of administrative irregularities." "This is an invasion of privacy," exclaimed Anthony, trying to regain control. "An employee can't spy on his boss." "He can when the boss is stealing the company from its true owner," Michael retorted. Jennifer was clearly shaken. She had worked 5 years at Horizon, was proud of the company, believed she was building her career in a solid and honest organization. "I need some time to process all this," she said, standing up. "Mr. Rodriguez, I think we should cancel all today's meetings." "Jennifer, don't believe these lies," said Anthony, desperate. "This man is trying to destroy everything we built together." "Everything you built with my money," Walter corrected. "And Mrs. Jennifer built nothing with me. She didn't even know who I was until this morning." Jennifer stopped at the door without turning around. "It's true, Mr. Thompson. I didn't know who you were, but now I'm starting to understand many things that never made sense in this company." After Jennifer left, the 3 men remained silent for a few minutes. Anthony returned to his chair, seeming to have aged 10 years in an hour. "What do you want, Walter?" he asked finally. "I want my company back." "That's impossible. Horizon has grown, has hundreds of employees, huge projects. You couldn't manage all that." "Maybe not," Walter admitted. "But I can learn, or I can find someone trustworthy to help me." Michael watched the exchange attentively. It was clear there was much more history between those 2 men than appeared. "Mr. Rodriguez," said the lawyer, "are you willing to negotiate, or will we have to settle this in court?" Anthony remained silent for a long time, looking out the window at the city below. "If I agree to negotiate," he said finally, "how can I be sure that Walter won't prosecute me criminally for the irregularities he claims to have documented?" "Because I don't want to destroy the company," Walter replied. "I want to save it. And for that, I need to understand exactly what you did with it during all these years." It was then that Jennifer returned to the room, carrying a box of papers. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I believe you should see this." She placed the box on the table and pulled out an old, dusty folder. "I went to the archives looking for the company's original documents, and I found this folder hidden behind a file from 1988. It was marked Personal Documents, A. Rodriguez." Anthony stood up quickly. "Jennifer, those are my private documents. You had no right to find the photocopies of the original documents you altered," she interrupted, spreading papers across the table. "Or of finding the receipts for the payments you made to forge the signatures." Michael and Walter approached to see the documents. They were photocopies of the company's original contracts before the changes, and a series of receipts for payments made to a document specialist in 1987. "My God," murmured Michael. He kept evidence of his own fraud. "I needed to make sure I had everything under control," said Anthony in a weak voice, "in case someone questioned the legitimacy of the documents." Walter picked up one of the photocopies and studied it carefully. It was a copy of the original partnership agreement, where he appeared as the owner of 85% of the company's shares, and Anthony as a minority partner with 15%. "Why, Anthony?" asked Walter sadly. "Why did you do this? I trusted you like a brother." Anthony sat down heavily in the chair, covering his face with his hands. "Because I was afraid," he said finally. "Afraid that you would discover what I was doing with the supply contracts. I had been diverting money for months to cover gambling debts. When you started questioning some inconsistencies in the financial reports, I panicked. So you decided to eliminate me from the equation," said Walter. "I thought it would be easier to take control of the company and pay off the debts with future profits. I didn't imagine you would find out or that things would get so complicated." Jennifer shook her head in disgust. "And I always admired your business journey. 5 years working for someone who built everything on a lie." "Jennifer," said Anthony, pleading, "you need to understand I turned this company into something big. I created jobs, built important projects. That has to count for something." "It does," replied Walter. "It shows that you are a competent manager, but that doesn't justify what you did to me. Michael was organizing all the documents, both the originals and the ones Jennifer had found." "Gentlemen," he said, "with this evidence, we have enough material for a solid criminal case. Mr. Rodriguez, you are facing very serious charges. Document forgery, embezzlement, formation of a fraudulent scheme." "How much time would I get?" asked Anthony in a weak voice. "Considering the magnitude of the fraud and the time period involved, between 8 and 15 years. Anthony remained silent for a long time. Jennifer walked over to the window, watching the city movement below. Walter remained seated, flipping through his notebooks. "I propose a deal," said Walter finally. Everyone turned to him. "You return legal control of the company to me, publicly acknowledge that I am the founder and true owner, and in exchange I won't press criminal charges." "But what about management?" asked Anthony. "I know every detail of the business, every client, every supplier. Without me, you won't be able to keep the company running." "Who said we want to keep you out?" said Walter. "You can continue as manager, but now working for me, not pretending to be me." Anthony looked at him in surprise. "You would trust me after everything that happened?" "I don't trust you as a person, Anthony, but I recognize that you have technical competence, and I'll be watching every step you take." Jennifer turned from the window. "And me? What will my situation be in this new setup?" Walter studied her for a moment. For 15 years, he had watched dozens of executives pass through the company. Some competent, others not so much. But Jennifer was different. She had something the others didn't. "Miss Jennifer, may I ask a personal question?" "You may. How old are you?" 37. "And how long have you worked in the construction field?" 12 years. I started as an intern at a small company in Miami Beach. Are you from Miami Beach?" "I was born there, but I moved to New York City when I was 18 to study business administration." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "And your parents, do they still live in Miami Beach?" Jennifer hesitated. "My mother passed away when I was a child. My father, I never really knew him." What do you mean? My mother always said he was a businessman who had financial troubles and had to move away. She never wanted to talk much about it. Walter felt something strange in his chest, a feeling he couldn't explain. What was your mother's name? Helen Williams. The world seemed to stop for Walter. Helen Williams. The name echoed in his mind like a distant bell. Helen, the woman he had fallen madly in love with in 1986, just before everything fell apart in his life. Helen, who had disappeared from his life without explanation, leaving only a letter saying she couldn't see him anymore. "I'm sorry," said Jennifer, noticing Walter's sudden paleness. "Are you all right?" Walter stood up shakily and walked to the window. His hands trembled as he tried to process the information. "Mr. Walter?" called Michael, concerned. "Helen Williams," murmured Walter. Brown hair, green eyes, a small scar on her forehead. Jennifer's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Walter turned slowly to face Jennifer. Now that he knew what to look for, he could clearly see Helen's features in the young woman's face. The shape of her eyes, the line of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. "Because I knew your mother," he said with a choked voice. "I knew her very well." "That's impossible," said Jennifer, shaking her head. "My mother passed away when I was 2 years old. You were here in New York City running your company. In 1986, I was facing the first problems that Anthony had created in the company. I was stressed, working too much, and a friend suggested I take a vacation in Miami Beach to rest. That's where I met your mother." Anthony watched the scene with growing discomfort. Michael seemed confused, not fully understanding what was happening. "Did you two date?" asked Jennifer in a weak voice. "Not exactly. I met Helen in January of 1986. She worked at a beach inn, and I was staying there. We talked a lot, went out a few times. She was... It's hard to explain. It was as if I had known her for years." Walter approached Jennifer, studying her face carefully. "In March, she told me she needed to tell me something important. We arranged to meet on a Saturday night, but she didn't show up. On Sunday, I went to the inn, and they told me she had quit and moved away. She left only a letter for me." "What letter?" Walter opened his wallet and took out a yellowed, folded paper. Jennifer took it with trembling hands and read aloud. "Walter, forgive me for leaving like this, but I have no choice. There are things in my life you can't understand, responsibilities I can't ignore. Please don't try to find me. Remember me fondly, as I will always remember you. Helen." "Mom always said my father was a businessman," murmured Jennifer, "a good man who had financial troubles." "Jennifer," said Walter gently. "When were you born?" "December 15th, 1986. Walter quickly did the math. 9 months after March. His legs gave way, and he leaned on the table. "My God," he whispered. "Are you all right?" asked Michael, standing up to help him. "Jennifer," said Walter in a trembling voice, I think I'm your father." The silence in the room was absolute. Jennifer turned as pale as a sheet. Anthony's eyes widened, and Michael simply didn't know what to say. "This is impossible," Jennifer finally said. "My mother would have told me." "Your mother knew about the problems I was facing in the company. She knew Anthony was creating financial difficulties and that I could lose everything. Maybe she thought it would be better for you to grow up away from this mess." Jennifer sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. "I can't believe this. For years I searched for information about my father, and now I discover he was working as a doorman in the company where I work. I never knew you existed," said Walter, kneeling beside her chair. "If I had known, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you both." "My mother passed away when I was 7, Jennifer said without removing her hands from her face. "Cancer. She never told me who my father was, only that he was a good man who had faced hardships." Walter felt tears streaming down his face. All those years searching for Helen, wondering what had happened to her, and she was gone. And his daughter, the daughter he never knew he had, had been right in front of him for 5 years. "Jennifer," he said softly, "I know this is a lot to process, but if you'll allow me, I'd like to do a DNA test to confirm." Jennifer finally removed her hands from her face and looked at him. Her eyes were red, but there was something else there, something that looked like recognition. "I always felt strange working at this company," she said slowly, "as if there was something familiar, but I couldn't identify what it was." "And I always watched you with special attention," Walter admitted. "I thought it was because you reminded me of someone, but I couldn't figure out who." Anthony, who had observed the entire scene in silence, finally spoke up. "This changes everything," he said. Everyone turned to him. "If Jennifer is your daughter, Walter, she has rights to the company too. She is a legitimate heir." Michael nodded. "He's right. If the DNA test confirms paternity, Jennifer has inheritance rights to your estate, Mr. Walter." "I don't want any of that," Jennifer said quickly. "I just found out I have a father. I can't just accept half of a company." "It wouldn't be half," Walter corrected. "It would be everything. I have no other heirs. When I'm gone, all of this will be yours anyway." "Don't talk like that," Jennifer said, standing up abruptly. "I need air. I need to think about all of this." She quickly left the room, leaving the 3 men alone. Walter remained kneeling on the floor for a few moments, trying to process everything that had happened. "Mr. Walter," Michael said gently, "perhaps it's best to postpone the company negotiations until this family matter is resolved." "No," said Walter, getting up with difficulty. "The company matter needs to be resolved regardless of the family matter. Anthony, are you still willing to negotiate?" Anthony looked at him with a confused expression. "Walter, you just found out you have a daughter. How can you be thinking about business now? Because if Jennifer is really my daughter, then she deserves to inherit an honest and well-managed company, not a business built on lies and fraud." Michael nodded approvingly. "You're right. In fact, this makes it even more urgent to regularize the company's legal situation." The 3 men spent the next 2 hours negotiating the terms of the control transfer. Anthony agreed to publicly acknowledge Walter as the company's founder and legitimate owner, in exchange for remaining as administrative director under Walter's direct supervision. When they finished, it was already late afternoon. Jennifer hadn't returned to the room, and Walter was worried. "Where could she have gone?" he asked. "Probably home," said Anthony. "She lives in an apartment in the Upper East Side." "Do you have the address?" "I do, but, Walter, maybe it's best to give her some time to process all this. It was a lot of information at once, I know, but I at least need to know if she's okay." Michael offered to accompany Walter to Jennifer's apartment. The 2 took a taxi and headed to the Upper East Side in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jennifer's apartment was in a simple but well-maintained building. When they reached her floor, they could hear classical music playing softly from inside. Walter knocked slowly on the door. "Jennifer." "It's me, Walter. I just want to know if you're okay." The music stopped. Footsteps approached the door. "I'm fine," her voice said from the other side. "I just need some time to think." "I understand, but may I come in? There are a few things I'd like to show you. Things about your mother." There was a long pause. Then the sound of the lock turning. Jennifer opened the door. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she had been crying. But she had changed and was more composed. "Come in," she said. The apartment was small but cozy. There were photographs on the walls, plants in the windows, books scattered everywhere. Walter looked around, trying to absorb details about the life of the daughter he never knew he had. "Would you like coffee?" asked Jennifer. "That would be great," replied Michael. While she prepared coffee in the kitchen, Walter examined the photographs in the living room. There were several of a woman he immediately recognized as Helen, some of Jennifer at different ages, and some of places that looked like trips. "Is this your mother?" he asked, pointing to a photo where Helen appeared smiling on the beach. "Yes. It was taken a few months before she passed away, in Miami Beach, on the same beach where you met." Walter picked up the photo and studied it carefully. Helen looked exactly as he remembered, just a little older. She was beautiful, he said softly. She was. And she was a wonderful mother. She worked hard to give me a good education. Jennifer returned from the kitchen with a tray of coffee. The three sat in the small living room. Walter, she finally said, if this is true, if you really are my father, why did my mother never tell me? Walter sighed. I can only imagine. When I met Helen, I was going through the worst phase of my life. The problems at the company were starting. I was stressed, constantly arguing with Anthony about financial inconsistencies. Maybe she realized my life was about to fall apart and decided to protect you from it. But that doesn't justify lying to me my whole life. Maybe she planned to tell you when you were older. Maybe her illness prevented that. Jennifer took a sip of coffee, thoughtful. There's something I don't understand. If you were the owner of the company, if you had money, why did my mother work at an inn? Why did she live so simply? Because she didn't know I had money, replied Walter. When we met, I was on vacation, wearing simple clothes, trying to get away from the business world for a few weeks. To her, I was just an ordinary tourist. And you never told her the truth? I thought about it. In fact, I was going to tell her at that last meeting we scheduled. I was going to ask her to marry me. Jennifer almost spilled her coffee. Marriage. I was in love, Jennifer, completely in love. In the few months we spent together, Helen became the most important thing in my life. Michael, who had been observing the conversation in silence, spoke up. Mr. Walter, not wanting to interrupt this moment, but we need to talk about practical matters. If you decide to take the DNA test and the result is positive, there are some important legal matters to resolve. What kind of matters? Asked Jennifer. Inheritance issues, mainly. With the regularization of the company's situation and the recognition of paternity, you would become the legal heir to everything. I already said I don't want any of that. Jennifer, said Walter softly, you don't have to want or not want anything right now. These are decisions that can be made calmly, over time. The important thing is to regularize the legal situation. And what happens to Mr. Rodriguez? He will continue managing the company, but now under my supervision, and eventually, if you want, under your supervision too. Jennifer stood up and walked to the window. This is surreal. Yesterday morning I was a regular executive working for a company I thought I knew well. Tonight I discover that my father is the true owner of the company and that my boss built his entire career on a lie. I know it's a lot to process, said Walter, but I want you to know that regardless of the DNA test result, I would like to have you in my life. For 15 years, I watched you grow professionally, and I always admired your integrity and competence. You watched my professional growth. I watched everything. Every promotion, every successful project, every time you defended an unfairly treated employee. You have something many executives who passed through the company lacked: character. Jennifer turned from the window with tears in her eyes. And if the test is negative? What if all this is just a crazy coincidence? Then at least we will have tried to discover the truth. But Jennifer, Walter stood up and approached her. Look at me. Really look. She stared at him, studying his face, his eyes, his features. Do you see Helen when you look at me? He asked. I see something familiar. I always have. I thought it was because you had worked at the company for so long. And I see Helen every time I look at you, in the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, in the way you smile when you're pleased with some work, in the way you defend the people you believe in. Jennifer began to cry. Walter hesitated for a moment, then gently hugged her. Regardless of what we discover, he said, I want you to know that I'm very proud of the woman you've become. Helen raised a wonderful daughter. They stayed like that for a few minutes, father and daughter getting to know each other for the first time. Michael watched discreetly, moved by the scene. Walter, said Jennifer finally, stepping back from the hug, can I take the test tomorrow? Of course. I know a discreet lab where we can do it quickly. And while we wait for the result? While we wait, I would like you to help me better understand how the company currently operates. For 15 years I watched from afar. Now I need to learn to manage up close again. And Mr. Rodriguez? Anthony will have to accept the new rules. He made serious mistakes, but he also has valuable knowledge. If he's willing to work honestly, we can find a way to coexist. And if he's not willing? Then we'll have to make more difficult decisions. Michael stood up. Folks, if I may, I think you have a lot to talk about. I'll leave you to it and we'll talk tomorrow to organize the legal details. After Michael left, Walter and Jennifer spent the rest of the night talking. He told stories about Helen, about the plans he had made for their future, about the difficult years after losing the company. She told him about her fatherless childhood, about her mother's struggle to raise her alone, about her professional dreams and ambitions. When Walter finally returned to his studio apartment, it was past midnight. But for the first time in years, he felt truly hopeful about the future. The next morning, father and daughter met at a private laboratory to take the DNA test. The process was quick and discreet, and they were told they would have the results in 48 hours. "So now what?" asked Jennifer as they left the laboratory. "Now we're going to the company to resolve the situation with Anthony," replied Walter. "Regardless of the test result, the ownership issue needs to be settled." When they arrived at Horizon Construction, they found Anthony in the conference room with 3 other executives. He looked like he hadn't slept well. "Good morning," said Walter, entering the room. The other executives looked in surprise at the man who, until 2 days before, had just been the night watchman. "Anthony, I believe you need to make some announcements to the board." Anthony sighed deeply. "Gentlemen," he said to the other executives, "I need to inform you of some important changes in the company's structure." For the next hour, Anthony explained the true situation regarding the company's ownership. The executives were shocked, some disbelieving, others clearly concerned about their own positions. "Mr. Walter will resume the presidency of the company," Anthony announced finally. "I will remain as administrative director, working under his supervision." "And Ms. Jennifer?" asked one of the executives. Jennifer and Walter exchanged glances. They had discussed this on the way to the company. "Ms. Jennifer will assume the executive vice presidency," said Walter. "She will oversee all daily operations while I readjust to the strategic aspects of the business." After the meeting, Walter, Jennifer, and Anthony were alone in the room. "Anthony," said Walter, "I want to make a few things clear. First, all financial irregularities cease immediately. Second, all suspicious contracts will be reviewed. Third, you will work with complete transparency, reporting every decision to me or Jennifer." "I understand," replied Anthony. "And, Walter, I want to apologize for what I did 15 years ago and for all the consequences that followed." "I accept your apology, Anthony, but understand that trust will have to be rebuilt gradually." Over the next 2 days, while waiting for the DNA test results, Walter and Jennifer worked side by side to understand the current state of the company. Jennifer proved to be a patient teacher, explaining each process, each project, each business relationship. Walter, in turn, shared with her his original vision for the company, the values he had tried to implement in the early years, the dreams he had nurtured for the future of construction in the country. "You know what amazes me the most," said Jennifer on the second afternoon. "It's how similar our values are. Whether or not we're blood relatives, we think very much alike about what a company should represent." "Maybe that's why I've always admired your work," replied Walter. "You've always made decisions I would have made." It was at that moment that Michael arrived with a sealed envelope. "The results are here," he said simply. The 3 of them went to the presidential office. Walter took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it slowly. He read the results silently, his expression revealing nothing. "So?" asked Jennifer anxiously. Walter looked up, tears streaming down his face. 99.9% probability of paternity," he said with a choked voice. "Jennifer, you are my daughter." Jennifer covered her face with her hands and began to cry. Walter stood up and hugged her, and this time there was no hesitation or uncertainty. It was the embrace of a father reuniting with his daughter after 37 years. "My girl," he murmured, "my dear daughter." Michael and Anthony observed the scene, both visibly moved. "Well," Michael finally said, "I think we have work to do now. There are legal documents to prepare, paternity recognition to register, inheritance matters to organize. And there's a company to rebuild, added Jennifer, stepping away from the hug and wiping her tears. A company that will once again represent the values my father always stood for. Anthony approached timidly. Jennifer, Walter, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I'd like to contribute to this rebuilding. I'd like to have the chance to do things right this time. Walter looked at Jennifer. She nodded almost imperceptibly. You'll have that chance, Anthony, said Walter. But it will be just one chance. There won't be second opportunities. During the following weeks, Horizon Construction underwent a complete transformation. Walter officially assumed the presidency, Jennifer was promoted to executive vice president, and Anthony remained as administrative director, but now working under constant supervision. All questionable contracts were cancelled or renegotiated. The questionable partnerships were terminated. The payment system was completely overhauled to ensure total transparency. But it wasn't easy. Some important clients walked away when they learned about the changes. Some suppliers who benefited from the old schemes created difficulties. There were moments when it seemed the company might not survive the transition. It was during one of these crises that Jennifer showed her full worth as an executive. Father, she said during an emergency meeting 1 month after the transition, we have to make a decision about the shopping centre project in Greenwich. What's the problem? The client is demanding we maintain the old supply contracts, the same ones that involved overbilling. If we don't accept, they cancel the project. That's 15 million reals at risk. Walter sighed. And what's your recommendation? Cancel the project. Anthony spoke up. Jennifer, with all due respect, 15 million reals is a lot of money. We can't simply... We can, and we should, she interrupted firmly. If we accept doing this project the wrong way, we'll be going right back to how things were before. And besides, we'll be teaching the market that our changes are just for show. Walter smiled proudly. Jennifer is right. We cancel the project. But how will we compensate for this financial loss? Asked Anthony. By working harder, selling better, finding clients who value quality and honesty instead of shady schemes. And that's exactly what they did. During the following months, father and daughter worked tirelessly to rebuild the company's reputation. They visited construction sites, met clients, participated in industry fairs, established new relationships. Jennifer proved to be a natural salesperson, capable of convincing potential clients that the new Horizon Construction was a safe and ethical investment. Walter, in turn, used his experience and wisdom to guide long-term strategies. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. 6 months after the transition, the company had not only compensated for the initial losses, but was growing consistently and sustainably. The quality of projects had improved significantly. Deadlines were being strictly met, and client satisfaction was at record levels. It was during this period of growth that an unexpected challenge arose. Jennifer was in her office, reviewing proposals for a new project, when she received a call from the reception desk. Mrs. Jennifer, there's a woman here who claims to be your aunt and wants to speak with you and Mr. Walter Thompson. Jennifer furrowed her brow. My aunt? What aunt? I don't have any aunts. She said she's your mother's sister, Helen Williams. Jennifer's heart raced. Her mother had never mentioned having sisters. In fact, she always said she had no close relatives. Send her up, said Jennifer after hesitating for a moment. A few minutes later, a woman of about 50 entered the room. She had greying hair and green eyes very similar to Helen's in the photographs Jennifer kept. Jennifer, said the woman with a trembling voice. My God, you're identical to your mother. I'm sorry, but who are you? My name is Clara Williams. I'm Helen's sister, your aunt. Jennifer fell silent for a few moments, processing the information. My mother never told me she had a sister. I know. We had some problems when we were young. We hadn't spoken for many years when Helen passed away. What kind of problems? Clara sighed and sat in the chair across from Jennifer's desk. Helen fell in love with a married man when she was 20. I disapproved of the relationship, and we had a terrible fight over it. She left home and cut off contact with me. I only found out she had passed away years later when I tried to look for her to ask for forgiveness. And now, why are you here? Because I heard through mutual acquaintances that you work here at this company, and because I discovered something about your mother that I thought you should know. Jennifer felt a chill in her stomach. What kind of thing? May I call your father too? I believe he should hear this. How do you know about my father? Because Helen wrote me a letter before she passed away. A letter that I only received years later, when I moved, and the mail was forwarded. In this letter she told me about Walter Thompson and about the pregnancy. Jennifer called Walter on the intercom. When he arrived in the room and saw Clara, his expression changed immediately. Helen? He said, confused. No, Mr. Walter. I'm Clara, Helen's sister. I know we look very much alike. Walter approached, studying the woman's face. You really are her sister. You have the same eyes, the same voice. Please, sit down, said Clara. I have some things to tell you that you need to know. Over the next hour, Clara told the complete story of the Williams family. Helen and she were daughters of a Miami Beach merchant who had lost everything in a failed investment when they were teenagers. The family fell apart. The parents separated, and the two sisters had to work from a very young age to support themselves. Helen always dreamed of finding a man who would truly love her and give her a stable family, explained Clara. When she fell in love with that married man, she believed he would leave his wife for her. When that didn't happen, she was devastated. And then she met you, Walter. In the letter she sent me, she said she had finally found true love, but she also said she was afraid. Afraid of what? Asked Walter. Afraid that you would leave when you found out she was pregnant. Afraid that the problems you were facing at the company would affect you. And mostly afraid that the social difference between you would create difficulties. What social difference? Asked Jennifer. Helen didn't know Walter was a successful businessman. To her, he was just a friendly tourist vacationing in Miami Beach. She was afraid that when you returned to New York City, you would forget about her. Walter shook his head sadly. If she had told me about the pregnancy, I would have married her immediately. I would have brought her to New York City, given her everything she needed. She knew that, said Clara. In the letter, she wrote that you were the kindest and most honest man she had ever known, but she was so afraid of being abandoned again that she preferred to leave before it could happen. But why did she never try to contact me afterward? Asked Jennifer. When I was born, when she was struggling, when she got sick? Clara hesitated for a moment. Because she believed you were better off without Walter. What do you mean? She followed the news about Horizon Construction in the papers. She saw when Walter lost the company. She saw the accusations of financial irregularities. She saw his complete downfall. She thought she was protecting you by keeping her distance. Walter stood up and walked to the window. So she knew I had lost everything, knew I was suffering, and still didn't try to reach out. Walter, said Clara gently. Helen left because she was sick. Very sick. The cancer was diagnosed when Jennifer was only 4 years old. She knew she didn't have much time and wanted to cherish every moment with her daughter, without complications. Why didn't she tell me about the illness? Asked Jennifer with tears in her eyes. Because you were just a child. She wanted you to have a normal childhood without worrying about her health. And why are you telling us this now? Asked Walter. Clara opened her purse and took out a yellowed envelope. Because Helen left me specific instructions. If you and Jennifer ever found each other, I was to give you this. She extended the envelope to Jennifer, who took it with trembling hands. On the envelope was written, "To Walter and our daughter if fate allows them to meet." Jennifer opened the envelope and pulled out a letter of several pages, written in Helen's careful handwriting. "Do you want me to read it aloud?" she asked. Walter and Clara nodded. Jennifer began to read. "My dear Walter and my beloved daughter, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally found each other. You don't know how I dreamed of this moment, but also how I feared it might never come. Walter, my love, forgive me for leaving without explanations. Forgive me for robbing you of the chance to know our daughter from birth. Every night, when I put Jennifer to sleep, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. When I found out I was pregnant, my first impulse was to run to you and tell you everything. But then I remembered your worries about the company, the problems you were facing, and I was afraid that a baby would be one more pressure in your life. I was also afraid, I confess, that you didn't love me as much as I loved you. I was afraid of being just a holiday fling, a summer romance you would forget when you return to your real life. I know this may seem selfish or cowardly, but I needed to protect my daughter from the possibility of rejection. I needed to be sure she would grow up loved and secure. Jennifer, my dear girl, if you are reading this, it means you are already a grown woman and can understand the choices I made. Your father is an extraordinary man. In the few months we spent together, he showed me what true love is, genuine kindness, absolute integrity. I watched his career from afar, through newspapers and magazines. I saw when he lost the company. I saw the hardships he faced, and my heart bled for not being able to help him. But I also saw his dignity in the face of adversity, his refusal to give up or become corrupt. Walter, I want you to know that our daughter inherited your best qualities. She is as smart as you, as principled as you, as determined as you. She has a kind heart and an unshakable character. Jennifer, I want you to know that your father was always present in our lives, even without knowing it. Every time you showed interest in construction and architecture, I saw Walter in you. Every time you defended someone wronged, I saw his integrity. Every time you dreamed big, I saw the dreams he shared with me during those wonderful months. If fate allowed you to find each other, it's because the time has come for you to build together what I didn't have the courage to build alone. A true family. Walter, take care of our girl. Teach her everything you know about life, about business, about being an honorable person in this complicated world. Jennifer, take care of your father. He carried many burdens alone for a long time. He deserves to have someone who loves him unconditionally and supports him at all times. And please, if possible, forgive me for the choices I made. Forgive me for stealing so many years together from you. I did what I thought was best at the time, but I recognize that I may have been mistaken. You deserve to be happy together. You deserve to build a family life. You deserve to fulfill all the dreams I didn't have the courage to dream. All my love, forever, Helen. When Jennifer finished reading, the room was completely silent. Walter was crying openly. Jennifer held the letter against her chest, and Clara watched with teary eyes. She really loved us, Walter murmured finally. Loved too much, replied Clara. Sometimes excessive love makes us make wrong decisions, thinking we're protecting those we love. Aunt Clara, said Jennifer softly, would you like to be part of our family? Would you like to help make up for all those lost years? Clara smiled through her tears. Nothing would make me happier. During the months that followed, Walter and Jennifer's lives changed completely. Clara moved to New York City and became a constant presence in their lives, sharing memories of Helen and helping fill the gaps left by the years apart. Horizon Construction continued thriving under the joint management of father and daughter. They developed a perfect partnership. Walter handled strategy and long-term relationships, while Jennifer managed daily operations and new business development. Anthony, surprisingly, proved to be an exemplary employee under the new management. The constant supervision and required transparency forced him to work honestly, and he discovered he preferred this approach to the questionable practices of the past. You know, he said during an annual review meeting, I sleep much better at night now. I'm no longer afraid of being discovered. I don't need to make up excuses or hide information anymore. It's liberating to work clean. A year and a half after the reunion, Horizon Construction had become a reference in the construction industry in New York City. The company grew 40% in revenue, but more importantly, it had become known for its impeccable ethics and exceptional quality. It was during this period of consolidation that Jennifer made an important decision. Dad, she said during a family dinner at the house Walter had bought in the Beverly Hills neighborhood, I want to implement a social responsibility program at the company. What kind of program? I want us to build affordable housing for low-income families, quality homes with fair prices without the overpricing that's common in that segment. Walter smiled. That was always one of my original ideas for the company, building decent housing for those who need it most. Then shall we do it together? Let's. But it will be a challenging project. Profit margins are small, risks are big, and we often deal with clients who have no experience in property purchases. I know, but I think the company has social responsibilities beyond profit. My mother always taught me that we should help those with fewer opportunities." Clara, who was attending the dinner, became emotional upon hearing this. "Helen would be very proud of both of you," she said. "She always dreamed of making a difference in people's lives." The affordable housing project by Horizon Construction was launched 6 months later, called Helen's Home in honor of Jennifer's mother. The program offered 2-bedroom apartments at prices up to 30% below market value, with easy financing and after-sales support. The first phase of the project, a residential complex of 200 apartments in Queens, was an absolute success. The unit sold out in 3 months, and customer satisfaction was extraordinary. "How do you manage to offer such low prices while maintaining this quality?" asked a journalist during the project's inauguration. "By working with smaller margins and eliminating all unnecessary costs," replied Jennifer. "There's no overbilling, no unnecessary intermediaries, no excessive marketing expenses. The focus is on construction quality and customer satisfaction." The success of the Helen's Home project brought national recognition to Horizon Construction. The company received social responsibility awards, was featured in specialized magazines, and began receiving invitations to develop similar projects in other cities. "Dad," said Jennifer during a trip to Boston, where they were studying the implementation of a new housing project, "sometimes I wonder how different our lives would have been if my mother had had the courage to tell the truth from the beginning." "It would be different, but not necessarily better," replied Walter. "If Helen had told me about the pregnancy in 1986, you would have grown up during the most difficult years of my life. You would have witnessed the company's downfall, the accusations, the financial ruin. Maybe that would have affected your upbringing. But I would have grown up with a father. That's true, but you grew up with an extraordinary mother who taught you solid values and correct principles. And in the end, fate brought us together when we were both ready for this partnership." Jennifer reflected on these words. "Do you really believe it was fate?" "I believe it was a combination of factors. Helen raised us to be people of integrity. That brought us to the same place at the right time. The rest was a natural consequence." During the following 2 years, Horizon Construction expanded its operations to 5 U.S. states. The Helen's Home program became a model of social responsibility in the construction industry, being studied in universities and copied by other companies. Walter, who had turned 75, began delegating more responsibilities to Jennifer, but remained active in the company as chairman of the advisory board. "Do you know what makes me proudest?" he said during an interview for a business magazine. "It's not the company's growth or the recognition we've received. It's knowing that my daughter overcame all difficulties and became a better leader than I ever was." "Don't you think about retiring completely?" "I do, but not yet. I want to see Jennifer established as CEO. I want to see the next social projects being implemented, and I want to make sure we leave a solid legacy for future generations." It was during this time that an event occurred that would change the family's course again. Jennifer was in her office reviewing proposals for a new project in Boston when she received an unexpected call. "Jennifer, this is Michael." "Michael? What a surprise. How are you?" "Fine, thank you. Jennifer, I'm calling because I received a very strange call today from a lawyer in Los Angeles." "About what?" "About an inheritance. Apparently someone left assets to your mother, Helen Williams, and since she's passed, you would be the legal heir." Jennifer was confused. "What kind of inheritance? My mother didn't have wealthy relatives." "That's what's strange. The lawyer said he couldn't give details over the phone, but asked you to come to Los Angeles for a meeting. He said it's something significant. Michael, this can't be legitimate. It must be some kind of scam." "That's what I thought too. But I checked the credibility of the firm, and they're genuine, big, respected, with decades of tradition in Los Angeles. They wouldn't be involved in fraud." Jennifer spoke with Walter about the call. He was also suspicious, but agreed it was worth investigating. "Let's go to Los Angeles together," he said. "If it's some kind of scam, we'll be prepared. If it's genuine, it's better to resolve it soon." A week later, father and daughter were in the office of lawyer Edward Matthews, a man of about 60 years, with graying hair and a distinguished appearance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said after introductions, "thank you for coming. I know it must seem strange to receive a call like this after so many years." "Dr. Edward," said Jennifer, "may I ask what kind of inheritance we're talking about?" "A substantial inheritance. A man named Robert Miller Williams, who passed away last year at 89, left a will specifying that his assets should be left to Helen Williams, daughter of John Williams, a merchant from Miami Beach." Jennifer and Walter exchanged surprised glances. "My grandfather was named John Williams," said Jennifer slowly. "But who was Robert Miller Williams?" "According to the investigations we conducted, Robert was your grandfather's brother. The two had a falling out when they were young over a family property and never spoke again. My mother never mentioned having an uncle. Apparently, John never told his children about his brother's existence. Robert, in turn, never married or had children. When he grew old and sick, he hired a private investigator to find his brother's descendants." Edward opened a folder and took out some documents. "The investigator found records of your mother, but when he went to look for her, he discovered she had passed away. He then found your information, Jennifer, as the only living heir of John Williams's lineage." "And what kind of assets are we talking about?" asked Walter. "A 500-hectare coffee farm in the countryside of Los Angeles, 2 apartments in South Beach, a property in Aspen, and financial investments totaling approximately 8 million reais." Jennifer was speechless. "This can't be right. Everything is documented and verified. Robert was a very successful farmer, but lived simply and never spent much money. He accumulated wealth over decades. But why did he leave everything to my mother if they never spoke? According to letters we found among his belongings, he always regretted the fight with his brother. He tried to make contact a few times over the years, but never had the courage to take the first step. When he learned that John had passed away, he decided to try to make amends by leaving his assets to the descendants." Walter shook his head in admiration. "It's amazing how things connect sometimes." "There's a condition in the will," continued Edward. "Robert specified that the assets can only be inherited if they are used to help people in need and build a better future for the next generations." Jennifer smiled. "He knew what kind of person my mother was, even without knowing her." "Apparently so. There's also a personal letter he left for Helen or for her descendants." Edward handed over a sealed envelope. Jennifer opened it and read the letter silently, then shared it with Walter. "To Helen, daughter of my dear brother John, if you're reading this letter, it means I managed to find you, even if too late for us to meet in person. All my life I regretted the silly fight I had with your father when we were young. Pride kept us from reconciling, and when I finally had the courage to look for you, I learned you had already passed away. I built considerable wealth during my life, but never had a family to share it with. Now, at the end of my life, I want this wealth to be used for good. From what I've learned about you, you were a dedicated mother who raised an exemplary daughter. That tells me everything about the kind of person you are. I trust you'll use these resources wisely and generously. If you have children or grandchildren, I hope they understand this wealth comes with responsibilities. It's not to be wasted or used selfishly. It's to make a difference in people's lives. With affection and regret, your Uncle Robert." After resolving all the legal matters of the inheritance, Jennifer and Walter returned to New York City with many plans. The unexpected inheritance would allow them to significantly expand Horizon Construction's social projects. "Dad," said Jennifer during the return flight, "I think I know exactly how to use this inheritance." "How?" "I want to create a foundation, the Helen Williams Foundation, focused on affordable housing and education for low-income families. That's a wonderful idea, but it will be a lot of additional work." "I know, but I think it's what my mother would have done, and it's what Great-Uncle Robert expected." The Helen Williams Foundation was officially created 6 months later. With the inheritance resources plus contributions from Horizon Construction, the foundation began ambitious projects to build schools and daycare centers in underprivileged communities, in addition to expanding the housing program to other regions of the country. The most remarkable project was the construction of an educational complex in Miami Beach. exactly in the neighborhood where Helen had worked at the inn where she met Walter. The complex included a technical school, a daycare center, and a professional training center. "It's symbolic," said Walter during the complex's inauguration 2 years later. "It's as if we're closing a circle. Helen and I met here, Jennifer was conceived here, and now we're building opportunities for other families here." During the inauguration ceremony, Clara approached Jennifer with a box in her hands. "Jennifer, I have something for you." "What is it, Aunt?" "These are the last things of Helen's that I kept. I thought you should have them." Jennifer opened the box and found photographs, some simple jewelry, and a small notebook. While flipping through the notebook, she discovered they were diaries her mother had written during her pregnancy. That night, in the Miami Beach Hotel, Jennifer read all the diaries. They were touching accounts of Helen's dreams for the future, her hopes and fears about motherhood, and her love for Walter. One particular entry caught her attention. January 1986. "I dreamed that Walter and our daughter were working together on a big, important project. They were happy, building something that would help many people. When I woke up, I thought it was just an impossible dream. But part of me hopes that if they ever meet, they could accomplish great things together." Jennifer called Walter to read the entry. "It seems your mother was visionary," he said emotionally. "Or perhaps she just knew us better than we knew ourselves at the time." 5 years after creating the Helen Williams Foundation, Jennifer had become one of Brazil's most respected business and social leaders. Horizon Construction was nationally recognized for its ethical practices and innovative projects, and the foundation had positively impacted the lives of more than 10,000 families. Walter, at 80 years old, finally decided to retire completely from the company's management, keeping only the title of Chairman Emeritus. "Jennifer," he said during his farewell party, "when I founded Horizon Construction over 40 years ago, I dreamed of building a company that would make a difference in the world. I lost that dream for a few years, but you helped me recover it and take it further than I ever imagined possible. Dad, you taught me that business only makes sense when it serves a greater purpose. That real success isn't measured just in profits, but in the positive impact we make on people's lives. And you learned the lesson better than the teacher." During the following years, Jennifer continued expanding the foundation's social projects, always keeping Walter involved as an advisor. The relationship between father and daughter had grown even stronger over time, more than making up for the lost years. Clara, who had become a loving surrogate grandmother to Jennifer, continued sharing memories of Helen and helping keep her sister's memory alive. One Sunday afternoon, 3 years after Walter's retirement, the three were having lunch together when Jennifer made a special announcement. "Dad, Aunt Clara, I have some news to share." "What is it?" they both asked almost simultaneously. "I'm pregnant." Silence was followed by exclamations of joy. Walter stood up and hugged his daughter, tears in his eyes. "My granddaughter or grandson," he murmured. "Helen would be so happy." "If it's a girl," said Jennifer, "I want to name her Helen." "And if it's a boy?" asked Clara. "Robert, in honor of the great uncle who made all this possible." 9 months later, Helen Thompson Coleman was born, a healthy and cheerful little girl who brought even more light to the family. Walter proved to be a devoted grandfather, and Clara a loving great-aunt. "You know," Jennifer said to Walter, as they watched little Helen sleeping in her crib, "sometimes I think my mother planned all this somehow, that she knew that in the end everything would work out." "Maybe she did," replied Walter. "Helen was always wiser than any of us." As Helen grew up, Walter dedicated himself to teaching his granddaughter all about the family, about the values that guided their business, about the importance of using resources and opportunities to help others. Jennifer, in turn, continued expanding the Foundation's projects, always innovating and finding new ways to positively impact underprivileged communities. Anthony, who had remained a loyal administrative director all these years, also retired, leaving the company in the hands of a new generation of executives trained in the ethical values established by Walter and Jennifer. "Anthony," Walter said during his former partner's retirement party, "I want you to know that, despite everything that happened in the past, I recognize that you've become a different man. You proved that people can change when they really want to." "Walter, These last 15 years working honestly have been the best of my career. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Everyone deserves a second chance as long as they're willing to make the most of it properly." 10 years after Helen's birth, the little girl was already showing signs of having inherited the family's interest in construction and architecture. She spent hours playing with building blocks and always asked about the foundation's projects. "Grandpa," she said one day at 10 years old, "when I grow up, I want to work in the company too." "And what do you want to do in the company?" "I want to build houses for children who have nowhere to live, like you do." Walter smiled, seeing in her the same altruistic spirit that characterized the family. "First, you need to study hard, Helen. Learn about architecture, engineering, management, and most importantly, learn about people and how to help them. Will you teach me? I, your mother, and your great-aunt Clara will teach you everything we know." As the years passed, it became clear that Helen had truly inherited not just the family genes, but also the values and sense of social responsibility. By 15, she was already actively participating in some of the foundation's projects, always accompanied by Jennifer or Walter. "Dad," said Jennifer during a foundation board meeting, "I think it's time we start preparing Helen to eventually take on responsibilities in the company and the foundation." "Do you think she's ready?" "I believe she has the right spirit, the technical knowledge she can acquire over time. Then let's start including her more in decisions gradually." Walter, at 90, remained sharp and active, though he no longer took part in day-to-day operations. His greatest joy was watching Helen grow and develop, knowing the continuity of family values was secure. Clara, at 70, had become the family's official historian, documenting all the stories and traditions for future generations. On a special afternoon when Helen turned 18, the family gathered in the presidential room of Horizon Construction for a symbolic ceremony. "Helen," Walter said solemnly, "today you officially become the 4th generation of our family to join this company. Your great-grandmother, Helen Williams, started it all with her courage and values. I carried it forward by building the company. Your mother transformed the company into a force for social good, and now it's your turn to contribute to the legacy." "Grandpa," Helen replied with a maturity surprising for her 18 years, "I promise to honor the memory of my great-grandmother and the teachings of all of you. I promise to use everything I've learned to help people and build a better world." Jennifer watched the scene with emotion, seeing her daughter take the first steps on a journey connecting 4 generations of a family united by strong values and a common purpose. 2 years later, while Helen was studying architecture at university and interning at the foundation, Walter gathered the whole family for an important announcement. "My dears," he said one Sunday morning, "at 92, I feel I've fulfilled my mission in this life. I saw my company stolen and recovered. I found my lost daughter. I met my wonderful granddaughter. I've seen our projects transforming lives across the country." "Dad," Jennifer interrupted, worried, "are you okay? Are you feeling something?" "I'm fine, my daughter. Just reflective. I want to formalize some things while I still have full clarity." Walter had prepared documents officially transferring all his shares in the company and foundation to Jennifer and establishing a permanent educational fund in Helen's name for when she turned 25. "I don't want you to see this as a farewell," he said. "I want you to see it as preparation for the future. A family that plans properly is a family that stays united through the generations." During the following months, Walter began recording his memories in an autobiographical book he wanted to leave for Helen. The book told the whole family story, from the reunion with Jennifer to the building of the social legacy they had created together. One of the most touching passages in the book read, "To my granddaughter Helen, your great-grandmother Helen Williams taught me that true love sometimes requires painful sacrifices. She gave up her own happiness to protect those she loved. Your mother Jennifer taught me that the mistakes of the past can be transformed into opportunities for the future. She took a difficult situation and turned it into something beautiful and meaningful. I hope you learn from our experiences and go even further, building a world where love, justice, and compassion are the values guiding all decisions." When Helen turned 21, she graduated with honors in architecture and presented as her final project an innovative residential complex that combined affordable housing with community spaces and environmental sustainability. "Grandpa," she said, showing the project to Walter, "I want to implement this project through the foundation. I think it could be a revolutionary model for social housing in the United States." Walter studied the drawings and blueprints with admiration. "Helen, this project is brilliant. It combines everything we've learned about social construction with modern technologies and sustainable concepts. Your great-grandmother would be proud." Helen's project was approved by the Foundation's board and became the first enterprise entirely conceived and supervised by the new generation. The complex, called Hope Residential Complex, was built in Newark and became a national reference for sustainable social housing. Walter, at 94, managed to attend the project's inauguration, which was one of his last public appearances. "My granddaughter," he said during his inauguration speech, "has built in just 21 years of life something that took me decades to understand. That true success isn't measured by what we achieve for ourselves, but by what we manage to do for others." 3 months after the Hope Residential Complex inauguration, on a quiet spring morning, Walter passed away peacefully in his sleep at 94. His last conscious act had been reviewing and approving the Foundation's strategic planning for the next 5 years. Walter's funeral was a celebration of an extraordinary life. Thousands attended, from politicians and business people to families who had benefited from the Foundation's projects. Each had a story about how Walter or his projects had positively impacted their lives. "He wasn't just my father," Jennifer said during the eulogy. "He was an example of how it's possible to overcome adversity, forgive betrayals, rebuild dreams, and leave a legacy that transcends our own existence." Helen, at 21, officially assumed the Foundation's vice presidency, working side by side with Jennifer to further expand social projects. "Mum," she said 6 months after her grandfather's passing, "I want to implement a new foundation program." "What kind of program?" "Financial education and entrepreneurship for youth from underprivileged communities. I want to teach them not just how to get housing through our programs, but how to build their own businesses and create wealth ethically. It's a natural evolution of our projects. Your grandfather would be proud." The Young Builders program created by Helen became one of the Foundation's most successful initiatives. Within 5 years, over 1,000 young people had completed entrepreneurship courses, with many starting their own businesses, generating employment and income in their communities. Clara, who at 80 remained the family's living memory, decided to write a book telling the entire saga of the Williams and Thompson families, from the separation of sisters Helen and Clara to the construction of the social empire created by Walter, Jennifer, and Helen. "This book," she said during the launch, "is a testament that families can overcome any adversity when they're grounded in love, forgiveness, and common purpose." The book, 3 Generations, One Dream, became a bestseller and was adapted into a film, raising additional funds for the Foundation. By age 30, Helen had become one of the most influential young businesswomen in the United States. She married an architect who shared her social values, and together they had 2 children, Walter, named after his great-grandfather, and Helen, keeping the name tradition alive. "Mom," said Helen to Jennifer during the twins' baptism, "sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if great-grandma Helen had had the courage to tell great-grandpa about the pregnancy from the start." "It would have been different," Jennifer replied, "but not necessarily better. All the hardships and separations our family faced made us stronger and taught us values we might not have learned otherwise." "Do you believe everything happened as it should have?" "I believe we did the best we could with the circumstances we had, and that each generation of our family learned something important that they passed on to the next." At 60, Jennifer decided to follow her father's example and began gradually transferring her executive responsibilities to Helen, remaining as chairwoman of the advisory board. "Helen," she said during the handover ceremony, "you are taking over a company and a foundation that have positively impacted the lives of more than 50,000 American families. It's a huge responsibility, but also a unique opportunity to make a difference in the world. Mom, I promise to honor everything you, Grandpa, and Great-Grandma built, and I promise to take our projects even further." Under Helen's leadership, the Helen Williams Foundation expanded internationally, creating social housing and education projects in countries across Latin America and Africa. Horizon Construction became a multinational focused on sustainability and social responsibility. At 80, Jennifer could see her grandchildren Walter and Helen, the twins, following in the family's footsteps. Young Walter was studying civil engineering, while young Helen was majoring in business administration with a focus on non-profit management. "Aunt Clara," Jennifer said one afternoon as they watched the great-grandchildren playing in the garden, "can you imagine that when my mother left Miami Beach pregnant and scared, she was starting a saga that would lead here?" Clara, at 90 and still lucid, smiled. Helen was always special. Even when we were children, she talked about doing big things, about helping people. I think she knew, yes, that she was planting the seed of something important. And you? Don't you regret having wasted so much time fighting with her? I deeply regret it. But I learned that sometimes life's tragedies serve to teach us important lessons. Losing Helen taught me to cherish every moment with the people we love. 2 years later, Clara passed away peacefully at 92, surrounded by the entire family she had helped reunite. Her last words were, "Tell Helen that I will finally be able to apologize in person." Clara's funeral was held in Miami Beach, in the same church where Helen Williams had been baptized decades before. During the ceremony, young Helen, Jennifer's granddaughter, read a letter Clara had left. "To all the family I learned to love, I spent my life carrying the weight of regret for having fought with my sister Helen. But you gave me the opportunity to be part of the family she created, even without being physically present. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this story of love, forgiveness, and building. Keep making a difference in the world. Helen is proud of all of you." At 85, Jennifer decided to write her own memoirs, complementing the book her father had left and adding her perspective on the years of the company's and foundation's growth. Memories of a Daughter Found became another bestseller, and Jennifer donated all royalties to the foundation. In the book, she wrote about the moment that changed her life. "When I kicked that elderly man out of the company, I thought I was protecting the organization from an intruder. I didn't know I was kicking out my own father, the man who had built it all with his own hands. Sometimes the biggest changes in our lives start with the biggest misunderstandings." At 90 years old, Jennifer could see the family's 5th generation beginning to form. Her great-grandchildren started attending family gatherings, listening to stories about Helen Williams, Walter Thompson, and the whole saga that had brought them there. "Great-grandma," asked little John, the twins' 6-year-old son, "is it true you fired great-grandpa from the company without knowing he was your dad?" Jennifer laughed, amused by the simplicity of the question. "It's true, John. Sometimes we do wrong things because we don't know the whole truth. That's why it's important to always try to understand before judging." "And were you mad at each other?" "At first we were confused and hurt, but later we learned that love is stronger than any misunderstanding." During her final years, Jennifer dedicated herself to visiting all the foundation's projects across the country, personally meeting the families that had been helped over the decades. During each visit, she told the family story to children served by the projects, always ending with the same lesson. "It doesn't matter where you were born or what difficulties you face now. If you work honestly and always try to help others, you can build any future you dream of." Many of these children grew up to become successful professionals, always crediting the Helen Williams Foundation and the Thompson Williams family with the opportunity they received in life. At 94, Jennifer passed away in the same manner as her father, peacefully in her sleep after spending a full day visiting a new foundation project in Boston. Her funeral was even larger than Walter's. People came from all over Brazil and from various countries where the foundation had implemented projects. The President of the United States, governors, mayors, business leaders, and thousands of ordinary people paid their respects. Young Helen, now 40 years old, and having led the foundation for a decade, gave the main speech. "My grandmother Jennifer taught me that true power isn't about pushing people out of where we think they don't belong, but about discovering where they truly belong and helping them get there. She turned a mistake into wisdom, a misunderstanding into love, and a company into a force for social change. Under Helen's granddaughter leadership, the Helen Williams Foundation became one of the largest social development organizations in the Southern Hemisphere. Horizon Construction was recognized by the UN as a model for socially responsible business. The twins Walter and Helen, Jennifer's great-grandchildren, grew up and took on responsibilities in both the company and foundation, keeping alive the family tradition of using business resources for social transformation. In 2080, 100 years after Walter and Jennifer's reunion, the family's sixth generation organized a major celebration. Thousands of people whose lives had been touched by the family's projects attended the event. During the celebration, a memorial was inaugurated in Miami Beach at the site of the Old Inn, where Helen Williams first met Walter Thompson. The memorial tells the complete family story and serves as an education center for social entrepreneurship. On the memorial's main plaque is inscribed the phrase that became the family motto: "When we push someone away because we don't know their story, we miss the chance to discover our own destiny. When we welcome with love and understanding, we build bridges that can last generations." The Thompson-Williams family story has become a case study in universities worldwide as an example of how family conflicts can be transformed into positive legacies, and how businesses can be simultaneously profitable and socially responsible. To this day, over a century after Helen Williams and Walter Thompson first met at that inn in Miami Beach, the Helen Williams Foundation continues to operate in dozens of countries, and Horizon Construction remains a benchmark in sustainable building and social responsibility. And in every project inaugurated, every family assisted, every life transformed, the values planted by a brave young mother who chose to leave alone to protect those she loved are present, unknowingly sowing the seeds of a legacy that would change the world. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story of family love and overcoming adversity. Do you believe Jennifer made the right decision by expelling Walter at the beginning? And what do you think about the choices Helen made to protect her daughter? Share your honest opinion in the comments. We really want to know how you felt. Don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.